I've always been more of an anime watcher than a manga reader, but a few years ago I stumbled upon a very interesting character my friends were discussing, and this character was very despicable, the scum of the earth even, and it was none other than the infamous Griffith, a man known for many things, and most of them weren't great things, if we're being quite honest. But his story was so intriguing to me that I asked where the character was from, and I found out he was from Berserk. I still remember the day I went to the bookstore and purchased it, and it was my first physical manga I ever bought and read. And till this day, the story of Guts and his struggles through the dark fantasy world was something that I love so much and now crave that I didn't know I ever would. I thought that Berserk was the only one that could capture a perfect blend of adventure and dark elements in a story that I didn't know I secretly craved, but I was very wrong, and Berserk started my manga journey to read more like it. Since then, I found more stories like Claymore, which is probably my favorite one that's similar to Berserk, but also has a great uniqueness to it, having a female lead, which will probably get its own video, so subscribe if you want to stay tuned for that. Gaunt's, Blame, even Poon Poon. Manga with great, unique stories, and while very dark in tone, actually have a great message. And some of them actually more powerful than Berserk, in my personal opinion. And I plan to talk about them all. But today, I want to talk about one that's more underrated. And while I don't hold this one in high regard yet as I do the other ones, I did feel like I had to bring this to y'all because of how unknown it was. And it's a manga about an elf boy known as Koinzel. And his story takes place in another dark fantasy world known as Ubel Blatt. Now, I didn't finish this manga, but I thought it was cool and just wanted to spread the word. Like I said earlier, I mainly watch anime, and I talk about anime mainly on this channel. And I know that Ubel Blatt has an anime, but I'm not finna talk about that weak ass shit. Because honestly, we all know that dark fantasy stories are best read in manga anyway, with even the Berserk anime being just okay compared to the amazing manga. So anything that isn't shonen, I've made it my mission to just read it. And Ubel Blatt is set in an old medieval world. Magic isn't really common or flashy, but more dark based. And there are still kingdoms, corrupt nobles, fake history to control its people, mercenaries, armies, and technology for the most part is still old, with primary weapons still being swords and mainly skill-based combat. And yeah, they do have powers, but mainly dark magic, and it has drawbacks. And the world and tone is mainly harsh and cynical. The first chapter literally opens up with the guy using a woman for her body. And then after discarding her, he decides to push his corrupt army in search for a man of the black sword, where they would of course find him and try to execute him. The man with the black sword is none other than Koinzel, our main character, and he's hiding in this village to replenish his power since he can only use his full strength with rest and a full moon. He's more of a laid-back, confident type character until things get serious and he has to lock in. And honestly, I like Koinzel other than the fact that this man is literally a crazy pervert. Like, the amount of chapters I've read with this man either trying to make an advance on someone or letting himself get taken advantage of is kind of crazy. And it's even more baffling since this is already a dark fantasy world where people are being trafficked and other horrible sexual horrors. So the fact that they would make the main character kind of like this is a little weird, but looking past this though, just like Berserk, they don't hold your hand and just drop you into the middle of the story, showing you how cruel and unforgiving the world is. One day you could be chilling with your friends, and the next day you're being captured and your town being burnt to bits, like in the first chapter. Koinzel, of course, is very skilled and deals with it quickly, making the downfall of these early villains so satisfying with how evil they are, especially when they have weird motivations like trying to make the perfect child through experiments or kidnapping. Like this lady right here, she really had to go. And now you may ask, what are Koinzel's motivations? Because a main character's motivation is just as important as the feats they accomplish. And I'm here to tell you that it's probably the best motivation you can have in a story like this. Vengeance. Or pure hatred. 14 heroes 20 years before the manga takes place were chosen by the Empire, and they were responsible for taking out an invasion. Well, during their adventure, these 14 was split in half. 7 would be called the legendary heroes, and the other 7 would be called the Lances of Betrayal. But don't be fooled by the name. Remember when I said earlier that the Empire was controlling history? Well, the Lances of Betrayal were actually the ones that got betrayed, and they were framed by the kingdom and these so-called heroes. And after being killed, Koinzel was the sole survivor of these betrayal lances. And like the dog he is, he plans on finding them and walking them all down, as he should. Because betrayal to that degree is honestly fucked up. And that's really the basis for the story. It can kind of be confusing, especially in the early chapters, because most of the people that Koinzel fights uses the Lances of Betrayal's names, but then you find out they're all just posers. But another thing that's cool is that, unlike most protagonists who are reincarnations, we don't have to find this out 100 chapters later, but rather in chapter 3 when he kills a character literally posing as him, and we find out his elf appearance is from him merging with the fairy after almost dying, essentially fusing with it through his will, which should already tell you enough about how strong his sheer conviction is. And did I mention bro's weapon yet? He uses a sword called the Black Wing, and it grows from inside his body and comes out of his head all freaky looking. And every time he uses it, it absolutely dominates, cutting through steel and armor like it's nothing. And I think it makes for a sick character design and a unique moveset for a main character, rather than him just shooting light beams or something. It's just straight raw dexterity, and that's how we like it. So if you want a story with good art and a dark fantasy driven revenge, then I think this would be a great story for you. The world seems to be very complex and rooted in lies, so you really have to be focused when reading it. I myself had to reread a few chapters a few times to make sure I was getting everything correctly. And now would I put this manga above a Berserk or a Claymore? I don't know so far. Mainly because as I've been reading, no character other than the main character has really stuck out to me. They're kind of very forgettable and they all look very similar. But I'm not very far at all, so when I read more, I'm pretty sure it'll all come together. Drop a like on this video, and if you want more manga structured content, let me know, man. I actually really like making these videos, and I've been wanting to get into reading more manga, so y'all drop y'all's manga recommendations for me in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.